Good morning, everyone. We're getting close to the top of the hour. I can see people joining. So why don't we give it a few more minutes and then we'll start. Thanks for your patience. Good morning again to those joining. We'll just give it a couple more minutes because we have people that are just now signing on. So just give it a couple more minutes and we'll do the intros and get going. Thank you much for your patience. Okay, looks like we've got the majority of people logged on. So I'd like to get going. Thank you everyone for attending. My name is Rick Bantelman. I am VP of Sales. Along with me on this presentation is Dan Gordon, the co-founder, one of the co-founders of MyWorkDrive, and he's also our Chief Technical Officer. So with him on the phone, he can keep me honest. Good morning, Dan.
Yeah, good morning, Rick. Good morning, everybody.
Okay, so in order to keep this on time, I'd like to jump right in. As far as the agenda, this is kind of a dual purpose presentation. We have a smattering of both current customers that are interested in the updates, and we also have people that are first-time attendees. So we'll do a quick review of the capabilities of MyWorkDrive, and then we'll jump into the new capabilities. And which is going to be called version 5.3. So let's just jump right into this. So for today, why MyWorkDrive? What is MyWorkDrive? Product demo. We'll talk somewhat of the roadmap that we'll leave it up to Dan and some Q&A. MyWorkDrive, we've been around a while now, 2014, time kind of flies. I can remember saying 3 years and now it's 5. We have customers that are commercial, education, government, across the board, and even sports teams, Boston Celtics, and secure remote access. This is how we do it. We have several ways to get at your network file shares remotely: a web browser, mapped drive, mobile, and we interface with Office Online, and you can actually launch MyWorkDrive from Office Online. MyWorkDrive security features. We support dual ADFS, SAML, two-factor authentication, compliance with HIPAA, FIPS, GDPR, no compromising file security, no data left behind, data leak prevention with encrypted actor authentication. So just to reiterate, we provide access to your network shares where they exist. So, and that's that no data left behind. Once your browser session is closed or you're accessed by a client, there's nothing left on that device. And compliance, HIPAA, FIPS, GDPR, again, we got it twice. And no compromising, no data left behind. It's interesting, they're all over the place, but we want to make sure you remember. And data leak prevention, which we'll spend some time on with encrypted preview. Data leak prevention, we call it DLP, but it's not your traditional. Data leak prevention means we can restrict. We can never change or enhance NTFS permissions, but we can restrict based on user groups to make them read-only, to let them not download, things like that. Office 365 collaboration. We provide direct editing of Office documents in Office 365 Online, edit documents directly from the browser or mobile client. And now we get into, everybody always asks, well, what's the architecture? How does all this work? And Dan speaks to that much better than I do. So Dan, can you speak to this slide, please?
Yeah, sure, Rick. Again, good morning, everybody. So the way that MyWorkDrive works is that companies have their own existing data. They have Active Directory already. They may have some NAS devices where their files are stored. And so they also have potentially Windows file shares. So those files remain in place wherever they live. They could be in their on-premise, or they could be in their data center, or they may even migrate things up into Azure or Amazon AWS. And so what MyWorkDrive does is, if you look at the center box there, that becomes a virtual machine that you put into your environment. Typically it's a VM, and that then points to the file shares and is a member of Active Directory. So that's one thing unique about MyWorkDrive is it becomes a member of Active Directory as a machine and a computer account, and so that it's tightly integrated. It's 100% Windows and IIS functionality, and so even logging on to administer the MyWorkDrive admin panel, all that's done with existing users and groups, whether it's the admin panel or the users on the client side, which is on the left. So what ends up happening is the clients are then able to log on to the MyWorkDrive server, which becomes a file access portal. And at that point, they can use either a web browser, a mobile client, or a desktop client. And as Rick mentioned, they can edit documents in Office 365. But one thing that's unique about MyWorkDrive is we're the only provider that allows you to edit those documents in a browser, but yet still keep them stored on your own servers, which is really important for a lot of companies. And some companies also want to completely lock things down. So that kind of contributes to the no files left behind feature in terms of being able to edit files, but that they just naturally remain stored on the servers. Nothing is ever stored in MyWorkDrive up in the cloud. We do have connections to Microsoft and our certified cloud storage providers for the Office 365 functionality, but all the data that customers have always stays intact and can be accessed side by side using traditional file shares like they do today. And then they're just adding additional functionality with the MyWorkDrive server, which is the virtual machine and client access portal.
Great. Okay, Dan, thank you. Appreciate that. Well, let's go on to the next slide. So what's new? So in version 5.3 features, and almost everything we do is customer driven, and we react very quickly. So for example, multiple map drive letters for each share. Customers have requested that. They say, well, our users are used to a certain letter indicating a certain share when they're in the office. And we'd like to have them have that same experience. So for an example of an S drive might be a sales drive, T might be a sales, or S might be T might be technical, white papers, whatever. So people have asked for that, so we're pretty excited about that. Another thing is shared public user access. What comes to mind, and this was actually driven by a school. We are very, very active in the education space, by the way, and one of the use cases was for students who are typically not members of Active Directory to be able to have access maybe to the teacher's curriculum. And so we've addressed that issue by having and Dan will certainly delve into this more, where those students would be able to access by having a shared access through one user ID. So, and then Dan will talk to that more, but that basically means you don't have to have all those people that want to do that shared access in Active Directory. And Shibboleth, and this was also driven by education. That is a SAML protocol used by education. So we're adding that to the stack of supported out-of-the-box integration. And open save multiple files in the mobile client. Not just one file for saving, but you can now do multiples. And this is very nice as well. We can zip and share files from the web client to be downloaded, so you don't have to do those one at a time. Also, we can add to an existing zip that's already been done. And then server admin panel enhancements, Dan will again hop into that to show you how that the drives, multiple drives are exposed, as well as how that shared public user access works, among other things. And now we're going to go into the demo. And what I've actually done is taken my actual demo that I do and turned it into PowerPoint slides so that we can make this available to everyone to see how it works without having to actually get the account, log in, and install server. So you can see all the functionality this way. We'll talk about the web client, we'll talk about mobile, and then MapDrive. So let's just carry on quickly. Web browser login. Here is the login screen that users would see. Again, we support single sign-on, duo, two-factor, but this would be the welcome screen that one would have. And then what you're looking at is the file explorer type view through our web interface. We never get asked for training because everybody's used to this kind of interface. So, and our MapDrive speaks to the same thing. And so if we look at here, just to give a little bit on the real estate of what's going on here, here are the shares that are exposed through the MyWorkDrive server. And I happen to be highlighted on this market definition doc. But so I can double click and this will open up in Office 365, or I can choose per client, do I want to open that locally? And we'll show you both of those. That can be kind of neat when you have an organization, and we do have organizations that are transitioning from E1 type licenses to E3. It's cheaper, and they're going to go directly sometimes from the MapDrive client to Office 365, not open it locally. We can also do that conversely from the web browser. You can open it locally rather than the Office 365. A little bit on the landscape up here. Here we can upload a document again if your NTFS permissions allow that, download documents, edit online, or we have things like you can share documents internally to another MyWorkDrive user. You can share via OneDrive and share via Outlook. So just to continue, so here we have we've added the ability to add favorites to your experience in the web browser. So if I just go back up here, like this folder clients, I've got clients, and then I've got customers, and then I got customer folders. Well, if there's one I access all the time, I can just make that a favorite. And this is where I would do that. So here's the path to it, and it becomes available in favorites. And then next time you click on favorites, you see your list of everything that you favorite. Views. We happen to be looking at the detailed view, but it's the preference. You can have a preference on how you want to view, again, your experience via the web. And now to go here, we talked about the zip from the browser. Here we go. I can highlight these three documents. I can say create zip or add to zip or download as zip files. So just it's again to make the user experience easier rather than doing one file at a time. And then we go through, and now we're actually going to show how this would work. So out of all my shares, I decided to highlight a particular document. Now, in this case, I can edit this document locally, as I mentioned earlier, by saying edit document. And this is totally configurable per client. And then, your typical experience of doing it. And notice I'm in Office locally, and I'm able to edit the document. Or I can say edit online. And edit online will take me right to Office 365. I can choose edit in browser. And here I am enjoying the browser experience to Office 365. Any changes I make automatically get saved to my WorkDrive. I believe Dan alluded to it earlier. We are not actually uploading this document. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but we are exposing the document through our interface through the web browser, because a lot of times I get asked if, are we actually uploading that to Office 365? And I always say no. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, Rick. What's happening is just like you would be accessing a file over VPN and opening it. It's opened in memory only, and even during that short period of time while it's open in Office 365 online at Microsoft, it's encrypted in such a way that even they can't open it even during that short period. And there's an extensive document on our support site that talks about how the encryption works for that. But essentially it's the same thing as you opening up a document over VPN, except that in this case it's doing it up in the browser, and all the the saves that you do actually are being made right back to your own server. And in fact, it'll automatically save as you do the work, and you can do co-editing on documents too, just like you can with SharePoint.
There you go. Thank you. I was just going to mention the co-editing, but you took care of that for me. Thank you very much. and, and then to go further down, and I talked about this, I can share a document internally. So let's go do that. If I say, okay, here I'm getting a link that for that particular document, I can copy that, attach it to an email, and any of my WorkDrive user, rather than having to go in and find the document, can have it this way just through a direct link. I can share it via Outlook. This would invoke Office 365 Outlook, and it automatically, you put in who you want it to go to, and then it attaches as a document. Again, this is only if you're allowed to do these kind of things with NTFS permission. And then finally, to share externally with OneDrive, this is where we'll actually take this document, hand it off to OneDrive, and then it becomes pure OneDrive, and the initiator can say, okay, who they want to send it to. And here we are. So we're actually in the OneDrive experience, and I can say, yes, I want to share this, and this is the name of the document, and I want to allow editing, and then I can identify everybody that I want to be able to participate in that. The nice thing that I like about this is your people that are collaborating, you own this document. When it comes back, you're the only one that can put it back in MyWorkDrive. And so that makes sense, so that you're getting the pristine document back in that network share that you're looking for. So now I'd like to talk about the our mobile client. We have obviously for Android and iOS, and we'll highlight specifically more iOS because of things like iOS files, locations, places, things like that. However, most of the functionality you see on iOS, we provide and let you do on the Android as well. So here's our here is the login screen for mobile, and it says username or email. That's what it would look like. I would like Dan to speak to this particular slide because it's somewhat technical in nature, so go for it, Dan.
Sure, Rick. So in this case, what we're doing with the mobile client is we're actually giving the customer the ability to make some group policy decisions about what they want to happen in terms of how the user will sign in. So there's this feature on our admin panel that I'll show in a little bit where you can let us know what your email domain is. And then what will happen is when the user puts in their email address, it'll automatically fill in that server URL that you're seeing on the right. So it's basically a three-step login. And as part of that, once it has that URL and they click next, then it'll do things and determine how do they log in at this company. Are they using Azure AD, and are they logging on that way? And in that case, it'll pop up a Microsoft Office 365 type login, and they'll log in that way, or they might be using ADFS. And then we also do things like determine whether or not you allow them to save their password on their device as well. So that's all kind of new. That's come out in 5.2 and 5.3, and we're continuing to refine that. So companies have the ability to do a little bit of mobile device management without having to do a third-party service for that. And as well as the single sign-on options for ADFS, Okta, OneLogin, Shibboleth, and essentially any SAML provider.
Great. Okay, Dan, thank you again. So to move on now, how the mobile, we've been told by several of our customers that our client for mobile is really, it's very good. I agree. It's got some features that I think are very good, and I'll highlight what I like best about it. So here, as you can see from earlier when I showed our shares via the web browser, via mobile, this is the interface. Here's that demo share. And I can view the mobile preview, which is, okay, here's all the particular documents. Here's that market definition doc here. We can see different images. This is probably a good time to mention we have a viewer that for, I think it's 68 different file types, something like that. So we can view just about any file type. And so then that same market definition doc, I could say, yes, I want to open this particular doc in the mobile client. So I click on that, and here it is in read-only mode. So I can look at the this. Maybe that's all I want to do. Maybe I just something's on my mind. I'm at a ball game, and I say, what does that say? Did I do that right? You can go look in that document, and take a look at it. But there might be times you want to, you get a phone call and say, hey, I need the particular document, and you say, and you only have access to your mobile, so you can, as you can see, click up on top there, and what do you want to do with this particular document? As you can see, there's, I'm going to talk about mail and copy to Word, but you know, whatever's in on your particular iPad, if it can open it up, you can choose that. But in this case, I want to email this document out. So again, if my NTFS permissions allow me to, I can, this document would automatically attach, open in my local email client, and send it off. Or maybe I want to edit this document in Word. So now you can say open in Microsoft Word. There we go. I get my keyboard up there, and I can change this document, and it'll automatically save back when I'm done. And here, lastly, but my favorite part is this download the docs for, and I call this download the document for offline usage. And so I can just choose download. I can bring it down, and it saves it in the download folder within my WorkDrive. Excuse me. And from there, I could be in an offline mode, no internet connectivity, and I can open this document that I've saved. Think about if there's a document you want to be able to do something with, but you don't have connectivity. This allows you the ability to do that. Also, I can, in this particular thing, I got my insurance ID cards in this email, and I wanted to save them to my home folder in my WorkDrive. Certainly can do that, and that would be stored. And I could save that in attachment, and here's the list of all of the shares where I could save it. And then again, later in an offline mode, well, here it is. I'm saving these two documents. This is just a view of what I saved, and you can name those as you wish. And now we can talk about places where if you want to, I showed you the mobile client, but if you're just in Office on an iPad, and you can use, we show up as a place. So you could just access MyWorkDrive that way, and this is what your experience would be. So that's, again, that's an iOS specific thing because of the places, but we certainly support that. Also, locations. So these two these two applications exist on the iPad. And as I was talking about earlier, I could have saved for offline usage or online usage, doesn't matter. And I could open up in PDF Expert a PDF document that's fillable. And then if I'm in an offline fashion, upload that back to my WorkDrive for extracting the data later. Or I could interface with Slack. We had a customer call one time say, wow, you work with Slack, that's really cool. Well, that's just because it's iOS, and we can do that kind of thing. And under locations, my WorkDrive shows up as a location. And we support iOS files, or I guess iOS file supports us. So we can, that's why we can do these kind of things. Any more you want to talk on this slide, Dan?
No, I think you got the main points, Rick. The thing of it is that because we're doing the iOS files integration, you can basically open the iOS files and be able to access files like you mentioned with any app.
There you go. Thanks.
One thing you didn't point out was that we do have a light web client for mobile, and that there are some customers who might want to lock their users down to only web, and that includes on a mobile. And so we do have a light web browser client that allows, even with an iPad, to be able to edit from within the browser too. So that's an option for customers where they don't want mobile, they don't want MapDrive, they want to lock them down to the browser and very, very tight and secure environments. We also support that too.
Great. I was actually going to mention that right after this slide, but thank you for doing that. So good. So now the MapDrive client, let's talk about that. And again, that supports SAML ADFS logging. So here would be a one-time prompt or not. I mean, because you can say, remember me, or you can also configure that you want people to log in every time. So that's totally configurable. In my case, when I go to my MapDrive, I just go right to it. So right now, So here's the path to it. Here's the user ID password. And in this case, the drive letter is W. So let's take you there. And just to show you, and Dan will do more about this, we can require, this is where we can say whether you want to use whitelisting or blacklisting of files. So our MapDrive client, everybody's used to a MapDrive. We can take it a little bit further with our whitelisting and blacklisting of files, which will prevent, you can say, okay, I want only .doc files, docx, office files. Those are the only file extensions I want that user to be able to put in a MapDrive share. So you can do that. Or you can blacklist and say, they can do anything they want, but I don't want .mov files or PST files or something like that. And this is here where we're saying you can allow saving of the password for passing through, just so you just click on your Files Explorer and it would show up, or you could force a prompt. Just wanted to show you that. You can also require email, username, or just disable the whole MapDrive client altogether. Totally configurable how you want to do that. So here we are, we're in File Explorer, and we're showing up as a MapDrive. Notice these are all the file shares that are available through the MyWorkDrive server to your network shares. When Dan starts in a few minutes, he will show how they can have MapDrive names, letters associated with them. And here we are again, the same, here's demo share that Microsoft, you could have a new document or an old document. Well, actually, that was named new. So it's, you know, everybody's familiar with map drives. It looks and feels like a map drive. And again, the enhancements are the ability to restrict users using whitelist and blacklist of files, so they're not clogging it up with files that aren't necessary. And now we're going to go into the admin panel demo, and where Dan is going to show multiple map driving, how the shared public user works, and the updates we've done in the panel, in the admin panel itself. Okay, Dan, take it away.
All right, sounds good. I'll make myself presenter here.
Good, I can see you at this point. There you go.
Great, so I'm on a MyWorkDrive server. In this case, it's a demo server that we have running up in Azure. And so we have Active Directory on the server so that we can be part of a domain. We've installed the latest version of 5.3 on the server itself. We also have the map drive here. And so we're going to start by just going into the admin panel. Like I mentioned before, you're using Active Directory natively. So we do get this question quite a bit. How do I log on to the admin panel? And as we talk about in our document, what you want to do is you want to make yourself an account that has admin rights on the server. Typically that is a member server. In this case, just for demonstration purposes, it also is on the domain controller, but for larger environments, you're going to have a separate member server, and then you're just going to be able to log on to the admin panel in the computer with an account that has admin rights on the box and the minimum capabilities of being able to see the shares so that you can add them and manage them within the admin panel. But you're not actually adding any users or groups outside of Active Directory that you have to then go back and manage, which is a big deal for a lot of customers because they don't want to have to do dual administration. So here's the admin panel itself. Once you log in, again, you're just putting in username, password for the domain admin. The admin panel here is where you set up all your shares and specify what users or groups you want to be able to see what shares. In the real world, it would be a network path here. This is for demonstration. We just have it going local, but in the real world, it would be going to your backend file shares. And you can see here that this is where we would be adding the new functionality for the ability to specify drive letters. So if you don't specify drive letters, as Rick showed in the demo, you're gonna have the option as a user to choose what drive letter you want MyWorkDrive to be. Then just like in the web interface, the user would see the shares in their root as well as their home drive if you allow them to be able to see their home drive. So in this case, we do want to have drive letters specified. We have home folder drive letter here that we would then choose as well. And so then you would choose as an administrator what drive letters you want to assign to what users and groups. You can specify the same drive letter more than once, but of course you would typically not want to do that because you would be, maybe you have for some units within your organization, the P drive might be a different drive letter for some groups versus others. That's why we allow that. If for whatever reason you did give that same drive letter out to the same user or multiple groups, then they'll just see the two shares showing up at the root rather than just the one share that specifies that drive letter. Another thing that you can do, and this is on purpose, is we can specifically leave one of the drive letters blank. And so this acts as sort of a mini data leak prevention. And so in this case, then the user can access those shares in the web browser or mobile, but maybe you don't want that showing up in the map drive. Maybe in some cases, you maybe only want the home drive to be something that is allowed to be used on the map drive. So that is there in addition to data leak prevention features, which enterprises can enable, and data leak prevention features, of course, always override as the least privilege. But so if I leave that the way it is and actually go to the map drive client, I've got one running on here just so we can see how it works. What happens is the user would put in the URL and then click connect. And once they click connect, that will pull down what settings are allowed, sort of like the mobile, in that we need to know, are you using single sign-on? Because we now support single sign-on, SAML integration and authentication across all clients, not just the browser. So I'm logging on. In this case, I'm just using username, password. And so once I do that, then I'll log on and I'll see all the drive letters are mapped. So this, just like we have in the office, we're going to see all the drive letters that are specified for that user for the various groups and the various shares that we have. So that's the main thing for drive letters. I'm just going to go into one of these shares just to kind of show what some of the options are here. So in this case, we do have data leak prevention enabled. So we need to let the users know or let the system know whether or not download is available or Office Online Edit is available. If data leak prevention wasn't enabled, then we wouldn't even have those options to contend with. But in this case, this gives us the granularity. So if we've got some users or groups that we want to allow those functionalities, we can mix and match based on the users. Typically in most organizations, you're going to be using groups when you're giving access to shares, because in that case, you won't have to come back here to manage. We really try to design MyWorkDrive from a management standpoint from IT, that it's set it and forget it. Once you create your shares, you determine what groups of users are allowed to get them. Typically, it's the same users and groups that exist in Active Directory now and have access to those shares. However, you can make it less than. So we can't give rights to the user because we're still using NTFS permissions underneath, but we can take rights away. So you may have, for example, a finance group that's in the office that you allow them to access those shares when they're there, but maybe when they're out of the office, you don't want to allow them. So even though they may have NTFS permissions, that drive letter simply won't show up for them. Or maybe you will allow it, however, you won't allow them to download, and you won't even allow them to use Office Online Edit. And once you do that, then those documents will come up in our viewer instead, and they will have a watermark across them as well as a date stamp and time of when they opened it. So there's no ability to download or clipboard or any of that. So that's what our data leak prevention actually does accomplish. So it gives you a lot of granularity. If you're just doing simple access, then you don't need to worry about data leak prevention, but a lot of customers do want to have that ability to be able to provide that. The other feature that we added in 5.3, as long as I'm here, is the shared user access. So in this case, we're going to specify a user that has access to this share that is a shared user. So what we're going to do is create an account that has rights to this share only, or only to the shares you specify, but this account is made for public share access only. It's not, you wouldn't be using a regular user account for this, because of this account is then restricted to only be available as a public type user. And so when they log on as that user, then they only have those permissions to be able to see what public users can do, and then you have the ability here to further differentiate whether or not you want to allow them to upload or download. So let's take a look. I believe we have an account on here. Here it is, public field. So in this case, I created an account called public field access, and what I did to this account is I removed it from domain users just to make sure that nobody accidentally gives them access to the wrong shares. I put it in domain guests, and then on that actual share that they have rights to, that I gave them permissions to it. So that way they have, not only are they locked down from the MyWorkDrive standpoint, they're also locked down from NTFS permissioning as well. We've seen other solutions out there where they have one account that goes across all shares and then tries to do the locking down within the software only. With MyWorkDrive, we're having you lock it down in multiple places as an additional security measure. We wouldn't ever want you to put in a domain admin account, for example, that would then have more rights. Even though we're restricting them in MyWorkDrive, we want that extra level of security there of being NTFS that would take precedence no matter what some administrator might accidentally do within the admin panel. So that's a really important point, and that's why we put them in the domain guest group. And so then in that case, when I log on, let's see here, and this is a real new feature, so I'm taking a risk here by trying to log on, right, Rick? But this will be out soon. There we go. So we have a field service share that we allowed this user to be able to get to. So in this case, this field service user can log on to, with the same user account can be logged on to with multiple in multiple browser sessions. So you could give out that username and password, like Rick mentioned, if there's a bunch of students or you wanted to make it available to someone outside of the company, that could be done, as well as the internal sharing link that a user would be able to send. They could send that internal sharing link along with the username and password, and then they would just go right to the document and be able to open it that way. So that, but they would still be locked down to within that share only. And when in fact they click on that internal sharing link, it's just going to come right up to the document. So in this case, we can see that we've allowed it upload and download. We've also noticed we can view online, but we can't edit it online. So we can do the viewing in this case, so it's going to come up in our viewer. This is what I mentioned before, and this, we don't have DLP enabled on this share. If we did have DLP enabled, we would also see a watermark across here. We would also see date stamp and time, as well as the username. We're allowing downloads, so that's available, but if all that was turned off, then those would also be turned off in this browser tab as well. So literally, you could lock it down to allow somebody outside of the company or a group of users that are public access to be able to view those documents without downloading them from your organization. And of course, all that information is then logged on your server as well. Let me get back into the admin panel here, and we'll just go through the regular features. Okay, so we talked about the shares. There was the field service. There's the public field user that we just went through. Standard settings. So here's where you would look at your license information once you purchase a subscription, or if you're given a temporary trial code, that's where you would paste that. You can also look here and see how many users have logged on during the last period of time and what your license status is. There's also your device ID here. If you ever were to need to contact support, that's another place to get it. It's also on this icon right here on the desktop. Notice we also have a collect button here for logs if you also would ever need to do that with MyWorkDrive support. As part of setting up a server for the first time, you'll be prompted for a couple of things, and that's what this wizard is for, which is how you're going to make the server available online and at least set up one share so that you can trial it out and really get a sense of how it works. One of the ways that you can try out MyWorkDrive is using our Cloud Web Connector, and in that case, you could then specify a host name under our domain, and then using our reverse proxy through your closest Azure Relay data center, you will then be able to access that same web address that we saw up here from the internet. It's not going to be as fast as a direct connection, but it does give you a sense of how to test it and how it works. You can even use the map drive for light testing. It will, of course, warn you that it's not supported full time because of the speed. It's more for just taking a look at and doing small file edits. So that's an option to be able to quickly get started on a trial and take a look at MyWorkDrive. Office Online Edit uses that same infrastructure. A lot of customers do leave that on, so then in that case, their users have the ability not to just only view documents, but also edit them online in the browser, and they're being saved back to their local file shares. If a customer wanted to run their own Office Online server locally, we also support that as an option. And you can granularly turn off and on the ability to do the local web edits, as well as determine whether or not you want to allow them to save a password. So when a user chooses to do a local web edit, we also pop up an additional password prompt and that also supports, SAML integration as well. So that's just an extra security measure, and it's up to you to decide if you want to allow them to save that password, at least for the 5-day timeouts that would occur within the MyWorkDrive settings. And then depending on whether or not you have Office Online subscriptions or you're using Office locally, you could then decide how you want the double click action. So if a user is logged on to the browser, when they double click, would you want them to be prompted to log in and open the document in their local office, or did you want it to just open up right within a browser? The default is to open it up in a browser because everybody can view it in the browser, even if they don't have an account on Office Online. You only need to log on if you want to edit. Require SSL essentially redirects HTTP to HTTPS. So a lot of customers will open up port 80 just for the purpose of less support requests coming in from users. That way they can just put in the host name and it'll automatically take them to HTTPS so that there's less confusion from their standpoint. You can force a username to be entered as an email address, even if you're not using SAML integration. If you are using SAML single sign-on, then you will of course be required to do that because that's how we match up the login. And you can turn off and on the map drive client and the mobile client, and Rick sort of already went through the various features in terms of blacklisting and reducing the capabilities of viruses or ransomware or people opening databases across the internet. You can also now specify what minimum version you want the user to be able to run so that you can use these lockdowns and restrictions. So if you want to be able to use these extra restrictions, then you need to have them be running the latest version of the various clients. WebDAV is a feature that can be turned off or on. We do support that for edge cases and special use cases, but you can also completely disable it. Some customers don't want to allow users to do on OneDrive sharing as well as Outlook Online sharing, and we have different capabilities for those in terms of the attachment sizes. And then for favorites, we now have that capability to be able to have favorites that Rick specified in this case, I'm just on a single server environment. If you were in a clustered environment, this can be pointed to a network path as well, and that's in our documentation. So you could save this to a hidden share on the network, and then each user's favorites would be pulled from there regardless of what server they log on to with clustering enabled. We also have the ability to do search. Windows search is fine for small servers, but we also have customers that have many terabytes of data, and so we have a third-party product called the DT Search that we integrate with, where that in that kind of scenario you would typically set up a separate machine that's only job is to do search and then index all your documents, including content within a document, and you're able to enable that here. And you can do some customizations, a company name, default language. You can decide whether or not home drives are going to be pulled. And when we say that, what we're talking about in this case is we're talking about the path that's pulled from this home folder. If it's specified whether or not that will be pulled, of course, that has to be a network path. You can also limit the ability for users to log on because we have some customers, maybe everybody has a home drive, but you don't necessarily want them to log on to MyWorkDrive. What you can do is you can check this box to limit home drive to people that have at least one other MyWorkDrive share that they can access. That'll prevent people from logging on that don't have rights to get onto the MyWorkDrive server just because they have a home drive specified. Here you're able to limit file size. We do have a lot of customers that maybe have limited bandwidth situations, and it's a good idea just generally, regardless, depending on the use case, to be able to limit the file sizes. Here's the email domain lookup that I talked about earlier, and we get a lot of confusion around that. What this really is you're just letting us know that when some user puts in for example, myworkdrive.com, what URL do you want them to be sent to? So, for example, like that. So when they put in their email address, click next on that mobile client, it'll automatically fill in this information for them, so they don't need to know what that is. And we're going to be adding that same functionality to the map drive and other clients as well. And the rest of this is just some settings and some session timeouts, as well as debug logging. We now have the ability to be able to export your configuration. So if you're building up a new server and wanted to do a migration, you can export your configuration and import it into the new server. We don't recommend that you try to clone MyWorkDrive. That will throw off all the licensing and you'll end up coming up unlicensed. And every server does require a unique device ID, and so that will completely mess things up, and so you don't want to do that. But you can export the configuration and then import it into the new server, and then let our support department know, and we'll allow you to do an additional activation. And if you have an enterprise license, here's where we get into some of the ADFS and SAML integration options. You can see we now have the ability to do Azure AD, Okta, one login. We have a manual SAML where you can pretty much do any SAML provider. We also have a build that we were going to put out as part of 5.3 that'll have a choice here for shibboleth authentication that'll automatically create all the settings for you. And that's what these are for. It's not that you can't use any SAML that you want, but we make it super easy. For example, Azure AD SAML, you can follow the instructions on Microsoft's site for MyWorkDrive and on our support site, and it's literally paste in one URL, click save, and you're done. You don't have to be editing manual files. It makes it super easy to be able to get Azure AD integration going. And then you can decide if you want to require people to log in that way, or maybe you're just pointing to the MyWorkDrive server and want to use single sign-on from your portal. But if they go in direct, maybe they can still log in username, password. That's your decision here. And MyWorkDrive is our service provider name, but in cases where you may have multiple SAML situations going, there's a possibility you might need to edit that, but that's typically something you would just leave as default. We also support Duo two-factor authentication, and in that case, you're just filling in these values here using this key, a random key that's been set up for you. And then in that case, again, there's integration information on Duo. It talks about MyWorkDrive and how to set it up, and we're listed on their portal. It makes it super easy to be able to integrate on Duo security. We also have people that want to do two-factor that do that from their SAML provider. For example, Azure AD would be an option. You can do, as long as the identity provider supports and does the two-factor authentication and then reports back to MyWorkDrive server that they're authenticated and allowed in, you can do it that way as well. And we do have a number of customers doing that with Azure AD specifically. Data leak prevention is what we talked about when we looked at the shares, and we have the ability to turn that off or on. You can also do some additional globally prevent downloads, globally allow Office online edit. So you can do some additional edits here on top of what you do at the share level, and you can customize your watermarks and what do you want to date stamp and username do you want to show on documents. Previous versions would allow you, once you install an agent on any file share servers, to be able to see volume shadow copy snapshots, and that's something that's documented in our support site. A lot of customers do like hourly snapshots on their file shares in addition to their regular hourly, daily, nightly, weekly backups. So that was a way to be able to expose those previous versions right from within the web interface if you want to allow users to be able to go to a prior version of the file and be able to restore that information. Here is our branding information, and all of the information can be adjusted, including even the web interface, the different colors, the toolbars, all of that can be changed, as well as putting in your own custom logo. And then we have some new capabilities here to customize password expired and account locked messages. So what we have is we have a lot of situations where if a user's password is expired, maybe you have your own password reset tool that you want to redirect them to. So you could enter that tool web address right here. So rather than the user just getting a message from MyWorkDrive that says, hey, your password's expired, and not knowing what to do, you could give them a link right there to your password tool that allows them to change it right then and there. Same thing with account locked out. So we have a lot of enterprises that want to be able to do that, or maybe they want to move totally to the cloud, and maybe the users just, they're not even potentially even on a managed desktop that has the ability to do the password changes that way. So you can customize those messages for that. Alerts is a new feature that we added back in 5.2, and the reason that we did that is for you to be having the option of being alerted to anomalous behavior. So we potentially, let's say you had an end user's machine that maybe had some virus going on that was modifying, or ransomware, so many files within a short period of time that wouldn't be normal for end user to do, you can be alerted on that, and you can do the same thing with sharing of files and downloading too many files. Maybe somebody's looking at leaving the company and wants to take a bunch of documents with them. You can be alerted on that type of behavior, and then you can decide how frequent you want to be able to do that. Logs are something that's been around quite a long time, and we do have extensive logging capabilities with MyWorkDrive. It's all in standard XML format, which can be pushed over to any logging server that you want, as well as exported and searched manually. You can search, for example, login, or if somebody deleted a file, you can look for that. It makes it much easier than the built-in Windows interface to be able to try to figure out what happened. And then finally, we have the wizard here, which is what you will see the first time if you're setting up MyWorkDrive, in order to get you to at least set up one share, what users and groups need to access it, decide how you want to make it available, and that'll just get the basic settings going so that you can take a look at MyWorkDrive. Did I miss anything, Rick? I think I'm running
No,
out of breath over here.
I think we covered everything, Dan. I think we got 2 review screens and just enough time for a few questions. So,
Okay, great. I will switch back to you. I think you should, there you go.
okay, yeah. So I just want to reiterate for just 1 minute everything you saw. Multiple map drives is an optional feature. Same drive letter can be assigned to multiple shares. The client supports multiple shares with the same drive letter. Shares without drive letters assigned are not mapped on the map drive. They do still show up on the mobile and web client. And client warns if the drive letter is already in use and does not map. Drive letter assignment does not impact the Mac or web or mobile clients. Supports home drive feature. So we talked about that. Just kind of reiterates these are the major new components. And shared public user allows a user account to log in multiple times. My example of a classroom, a professor, and students, that makes sense in that case. Use a standard NTFS user with specific permissions and group membership. Does not permit login from Mac Drive or mobile on purpose, again, because of the way we want that to work. Once you're a shared public user, you can only be used as a shared public user. Limited functionality to view, upload, and download files, and we do not allow sharing, online editing, etc. And upload, download can be enabled or disabled per share. DLP and file type blocking features override that. So that's a lot in a mouthful, but I think Dan was pretty thorough on how he showed all that working.
Yeah, and we'll be putting that all in support docs as well.
There you go. And as we're getting close to the hour, do we have any questions out there, Dan?
Yeah, and just as I figured, we have a question here for laptop users who are in the office part-time and in the field rest of the time. Can MyWorkDrive detect when a user is remote and when they're local so that it only maps drives when they are remote? So that is something that we're going to be trying to implement in the next version of MyWorkDrive. What we would have to do in this case is detect whether or not those local shares are available. So if the user comes into the office, since you've already told MyWorkDrive what that share path is, we would have that map drive client poll occasionally to determine whether or not the SMB share is now available, and then go through that pathway using the map drive client, the MyWorkDrive, continuing to use the MyWorkDrive client. However, the actual protocol would be using the SMB file sharing rather than going through HTTPS and going through the MyWorkDrive server. So that's the path that we're looking at. We've tried to do a little bit of that work in the past and ran into some roadblocks, but we think that we've been able to overcome those, so that should now be an option and we'll be working on as top priority in version 5.4.
Perfect. Any other questions?
When will the upgrade be available for 5.3? So we do have a number of customers that are actually doing a private beta on that. If it is something that you want to take a look at, email Rick over at sales@MyWorkDrive and we can get a private link out to you to be able to start doing some testing on it. Of course, we'll try to make it available to the public as soon as we can for preview right on the site, hopefully within a week or two. And then after that, as time permits and we finish all our QA testing and get feedback from customers, then we'll make that the production version of MyWorkDrive.
Great.
We do have a question here on how does the upgrade work? And in that case, it's just an in-place upgrade. That's the way MyWorkDrive works. All the settings automatically are retained and you just do an in-place upgrade in that case.
And I get questions, Dan, you can help me with that. Is a reboot of the server required after the upgrade?
We do prompt for a reboot, and so you should try to plan for a window that,
Perfect.
Yeah, for that.
All right. Well, is that the last question came in?
Well, we do have a question here on will external link sharing be added in the future? So We are looking at doing that, and we're going to build on what we just showed in the demo around public user shared access. So in order to be able to leverage the security that we'll be doing there, where it's locked down to that one user for that one share with the permissions that we showed in the demo. And so right now you can already, as I mentioned, have an internal user, right mouse click, create an internal file share link, send that internal file share link to an external user along with that public user name and password. And so there's just that additional authentication that they would have to do to be able to view that. But what we hope to do is leverage that we've built in order to be able to just send out a link, and then just the authentication is built into the link, and then optionally allow an additional password and set the expiration and things like that.
Great. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, and I know a lot of folks have back-to-back meetings, and so they're going to.
Well, we do. I do see a couple more questions. If those can stay on just a minute longer, if you wanted to try to go
That'd
through.
That'd be great. And those that can't, thank you very much. If you want to email me at sales@myworkdrive.com and want a copy of the presentation, let me know, and I will send it to you. Thanks for those that have to leave, and we'll continue on.
Yeah. So we have a question here on, has the file size limitation for OneDrive sharing been increased? I believe it is the same as it always has been. We don't have any control of that. That's something that Microsoft controls. Now that we do have this public user access feature, you can already now take with version 5.3, you'll be able to then send out a username password for an external user that would have limited rights to just that share to be able to download that file. And you can also send them the link that we talked about too. So that might be an alternative if you've got the amount of bandwidth that you would need to be able to support users pulling that right off of your own server. And I think that's it, Rick. I think we got it. That's the last question. I think we're in good shape.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm sorry we ran a little bit over, but again, thank you very much. We used to be able to do this in a half hour, but we've gotten pretty robust in our functionality.
A lot of new features to talk about in this build, and we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I as well. For being in sales, I think it's great. So thank you again.
I see everybody. One thing here to mention also is that versus cloud or on-premise only. So this is basically MyWorkDrive is, you can run it anywhere you want, but it is private cloud. So it's assuming your storage and your data center, wherever that might live. So if you want to move your files into Azure and have those files on some virtual machines up there along with Active Directory, you can do that. You can also run MyWorkDrive on-premise or in your own data center. But MyWorkDrive is private cloud through and through. We will potentially add some hybrid cloud stuff in the future where we would host your web components, but right now everything really is private cloud. So you can run that. All the stuff that you saw here, you can run in your own environment, or you can run it up in any hosted environment that you want.
Great. Yeah, valuable.
Just wanted to squeeze that in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's great info. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing some of you do downloads or our current customers adopting the new release, and we'll hopefully talk to you people soon. Thanks so much for attending.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rick. Take care.